as we briefly alluded to, what we decided to do was we decided to cover our respective tracks.
Yes.
And just to see how it goes. I was originally gonna cover one of your like songs, like your actual songs.
Yeah, and I still don't know what one you did. I have some guesses though.
I should qualify it by saying that I didn't actually sing one of your songs.
Yeah.
And I kind of wish that I did, because I'm starting to practice singing a little more, and I eventually would like to improve my vocal capacity. But I decided, just because I love your album Dead Roaches, and I think it's a sleeper hit.
Yeah.
It's
you had a lot of praise for Dead Roaches. I screenshotted some of your comments because
yeah.
if I ever had like a CD release or something, that would be a quote that I would put on the back of it.
I think it's actually brilliant. In my opinion, it was met with a good amount of acclaim on SoundCloud. It's almost like Captain Beefheart and the Magic Band's album, Trout Mask Replica, where it's like you listen to it once and you're like, oh, okay, that's interesting. I've never heard anything quite like that before. And then you revisit it and you revisit it and you revisit it. And it's like, there's something brilliant in here. Even if it wasn't like intentional, it was like, there's something, there's like a sense of discord and conflict that happens like within the song that kind of creates the sense of like unease. And then that kind of gives way to some of the more structured composition. I think it's like that itself is what I really dig about it. And I've been thinking about it more and more and more. And I think in some ways it's inspired me to try something with a similar compositional style, at least in a very kind of abstract sense, something that kind of uses discord and unease, and that the contrast between, sharper, what do you call it, atonal style of composition, and that it kind of like gives way to a little more structure and a little more simplicity, I guess you could say. But when we discuss the album that I'm going to recommend is somehow cursorily related to what I'm talking about right now. So I don't want to spoil that, but I'll just say that, I dig it. I decided to do a song from that album. I'm not sure if you want to listen to that right now. I kind of spoiled it, but
my guess is this. I have two guesses of what song you did. The one I think is more likely is the song "The Dead Roaches" off of the Dead Roaches album.
Yeah, that's the one. That's the one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because and that was entirely based on the number of plays that it recently had in the SoundCloud stats.
Okay.
Yeah. A couple days ago, I would have guessed you were doing "Swarming Dead Flies" because that one had the most plays.
Is that the first song on the album?
That is the first song.
Yeah. I found, so I wasn't going to cover that one because it would be like part of that song quotes Elevator Chapter 1, and I thought it would be kind of too self-referential in order to cover a song that kind of quotes my composition. So
to take it an extra layer further, so the song "Swarming Dead Flies" off of my album "The Dead Roaches" is actually a remake of two other songs from a previous album that I made called Pseudo Classics Disc 1, where the first section of that song was called Elevator Elevating, which was essentially a ripoff of your song Elevator Chapter 1. So it's like an extra layer of covering on covers.
Yeah, and it's interesting, like this is some good lore happening right now, because
and also, if you're not aware, a remake of Elevator Chapter 1 is the intro of our podcast.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. So it has like existed throughout the ages. It has become a standard in our own kind of existing canon. But anyway, so the song that I decided to do was Dead Roaches. Since I've given it away, did you want to just play that one right now, or?
Yeah. I thought that was pretty good. I'll be curious to listen to it again because I wish I'd turned my volume up a bit, but I didn't want to fuck with anything. But I did really like that because in the original version, maybe in the edit we can include like 10 seconds of the original of each of these songs when we're comparing them.
Mm-hmm.
But my version is very repetitive. It's essentially a 4-bar pattern repeating the whole time with a piano solo that isn't really in any particular key going on over top of it. I like how you used the main melody elements in this, but made it a more complex and interesting arrangement to it.
Yeah, there's a bit of guitar wankery in it, but
yeah, and more of like a swing tempo to it at parts.
Yeah,
the drums.
So what I had originally done was that what I wanted to do is that yours is in more of like a straight eighths type drum pattern. What I had done was that I'd alternated it between like shuffle and a straight eighths pattern, and it just sounded kind of weird, and I just decided to make it a straight up jazz song, which is kind of my original. I wanted to take the pseudo jazz and kind of like jazzify it to make, if that makes any sense. And with this particular composition, when I was trying to transcribe the chords, I noticed that it was a modal progression. Like it was I think it was C minor, E flat, major 7 to just an F triad. I like that because it's in a C Dorian, and so this was good for two reasons, right? I could just instead of having to play over changes, I could just solo in C Dorian without having to worry about doing any modulations or changing arpeggios or anything like that. I could just wank around in C Dorian, and actually it was interesting because I've never done really like a modal jazz kind of composition before, and I wish I had incorporated a little more elements of modal jazz, but what I tried to do was play around with interesting voicings in the harmony. So when the piano is playing, I tried to voice the chords all kinds of different ways, like doing chordal voicings and all that, and doing like upper suspensions and that kind of thing. What I found is that the composition works really well as that kind of like modal jazz composition. Now, what I was going to do is, because I have absolutely no knowledge of the bass whatsoever, I used a MIDI bass. I was actually thinking of asking you for your help, but then it would have spoiled the
it would have defeated the purpose.
So what I tried to do is I tried to make a walking bass line that kind of used the chord tones. I didn't want to alter the composition too much because it had a driving kind of feel to it. The original composition did that, and it had that sense of like plodding forward. The thing that actually took me a long time was to program the drums and stuff like that, because just doing like a swing pattern over and over again, like doing a shuffle, just made it kind of like really boring after a little while. What I did was when I recorded the guitar, I found that it was like way off of time. So I just like recorded elements of the solo. And if I liked the first few minutes, I would edit out everything else, and then I would add things to it. And if I didn't like it, I would just edit out the parts that I didn't like. And then I kind of made this kind of like Frankenstein's monster of a solo. And it was fun because it gave me an opportunity to like practice my jazz soloing. But I still like the original more because it has more of a distinct quality to it, and I love the timbre of that synth.
Which synth?
The synth that plays the main melody. Or I'm not sure if it's a synth or it would be another.
I will tell you now, that is a real instrument. That is a melodeon. Yeah.
Yeah, the da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah, my problem with that, because I mentioned to you previously, but I was It's been a side project where I'm trying to re-record elements of that album that I wasn't happy with to make what I would consider a definitive version of it. Specifically, re-recording all the bass because I wasn't happy with how the bass went. And then some of the drums, all the drums in the original version were actual drum recordings. But because I don't know how to play drums for shit, they were kind of a bit rough in my opinion. So replacing those with a similar, probably MIDI counterpart. And then specifically in the Dead Roaches song, the melodian part, when you isolate that audio, I can hear the backing music that was coming out of my headphones while I was recording it.
Oh. Okay.
So I can like hear a
then.
shitty drum beat with the piano going on in that recording. So I wanted to replace that specifically because when I try and remix it, I can't really do it in a way that I like. One thing I was thinking of was replacing that instrument with more of a brass section playing that line.
Yeah, I can probably accommodate that. I mean, I don't have a
Yeah,
brass
because I know
section,
you've
but I do
got
have
the
the Hollywood brass, or the
yeah.
I think it's called Hollywood brass. Yeah.
Yeah, some sort of horn section there, but that will be an ongoing project.
Yeah, I'm probably gonna do that once I get my USB jack. I'll try to do it like just by inputting MIDI notes. But sorry, go ahead. Sorry,
once you solder the USB.
Yeah.
USB-B.
I hope that solves the problem because I'm just like I've had it with fucking inputting MIDI notes like manually. I dig your cover, and I thought that the little quote at the end for the the VHS experience was awesome. And I thought that.
Wait, so you listened to mine?
The cover, yeah, low light.
Oh, I thought we were gonna listen to it at the same time.
Did we not?
Oh, you listened to mine while I was listening to yours.
Yeah, I thought that's what we were gonna do.
Oh, I thought we were both listening to Dead Roaches, then we were both gonna listen to the other one.
No. I thought we were gonna, like, in order to save time, we were gonna listen to each other's composition.
Oh, okay. That probably makes more sense. yeah, basically, I wasn't sure what song I was originally going to do of yours. At a time, I thought I would try the VHS Experience one, but that one seemed more. It seemed more the premise of it was based around the aesthetics of the sound, the VHS Experience, if you will.
Yeah, and there's a lot of detuned synths in that one too.
Yeah, so I didn't. And going for an aesthetic or a specific sound isn't really where my strengths are. So I didn't want to do something like that and not do it the full justice. So I decided to go to try to do the low light song in my own style. So I listened to it and I tried to just essentially play the main melody of those of the electric piano chords on bass. And what I came up with was a bass line that essentially fit in the key of C pretty well. I couldn't tell you what the actual chords are of the song or what key they fit into. So I figured that I would just build around that main line. And I added some synths and some other instruments and stuff. And then that leading synth. And then the second section, I really like the song because the first section is a pattern of 5 bars and then it goes to a pattern of 3 bars. And I knew I wanted to try and incorporate an element of the VHS Experience in there. And I thought about having that main melody going on during the 3-bar pattern, because then it would become off sync by a bar every time, but I couldn't do it in a way that I liked. So I decided to add that as the third section, because in the original it goes back to that main chord progression, but with some new elements and stuff. But I didn't really have any ideas to mix up the elements anymore, so I decided to do that little VHS Experience at the end, which was a it was a pain in the ass to record the because I recorded first. I interpreted the line on a MIDI instrument, and then I changed the key. I think I just moved it up a tone so that, cause I think the main chord of the first bar was A flat minor, so I made it A minor just so it would be in a relatively similar key as it was before. And then the next bar I believe is C minor, and that 3-bar pattern, the second section of the song, sort of goes from a C to a C minor, so it kind of fit into the same family of chords that we'd already done. But when I tried to, when I had the MIDI file, I then brought that into the program Muse score and was able to determine the tablature form of that. And then I had to record it on both guitar and bass, but I essentially had to record each bar as a standalone thing because there was no way I could learn that whole line and perform it in a single go to perfection, at least in the time constraint that I had.
Yeah, so I have to ask, would you be able to provide me with a rendition of that synth? Like, can you export it? Because I love that lead synth so much.
Of the main section, the first section?
Yeah, I think you can export or things in Logic as like a it wouldn't be a component. It would be, I think Logic has a proprietary file type for channel strip settings, or for, I'm not sure what synth is it. It's like the ES2 or EX.
If you go into Logic, I think the synth is called, it's either called called something like Electric Buzz or Elastic Lead or something like that. It's one of those ones. It starts with an E. It's in the lead synth section.
Cool. I will definitely check that out because I like the sound of the synths and the kind of there's more like kind of upper harmonics to it. It's a little more kind of buzzy. I like that.
Yeah. And with a lot of the lead synths in Logic, if you hold down one note, which is what I like to do and what I did in this song, you hold down one note and then you're playing the other notes over top of that, and then when you stop playing those other notes, it goes back to the main one. It's the notes don't create chords. It's just sort of a different note is taking over.
Monophonic.
So what's that?
Like a monophonic synth, or
yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So if you're playing a single note, if you always have that one to fall back on, then you can sort of just twiddle around on top of that and then go back to the main thing at the end.
Oh yeah, so it creates like a drone type thing where you have that kind of central note and then you play around it and then it always kind of deviates back to it. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, like I did, I had that main droning note and then I did like a few other things over top of that, and then I recorded over that again and did some higher twiddly things as the sort of lead into the next bar kind of thing.
Sick.
I was mostly happy with how that turned out. I liked that it sounded almost nothing like what low light is. I liked that I took essentially just the main melody of the two sections as well as parts from VHS Experience, and then just I tried for the most part, like I would listen to them to compare them to make sure that I'm still making the same song, but for the most part I just wanted to take the main melody and then just take it in a completely different style than what you had already done successfully.
Yeah. So for me, I mean, as far as a learning experience goes, like it kind of, I wasn't totally blown away by the production, and if I had more time, I literally did the whole thing yesterday, because this whole week that for me has been, I just felt like totally creatively deprived. But I like what I was able to achieve solo wise in the guitar. Like I only had to do a few edits, as in like editing one part and having to go back and track a new solo. So I'm kind of proud of that. I don't love how wanky it sounds. I chose to keep the tempo of the original track. And what I was going to do originally, I was going to take one of your tracks and kind of make them into more of like a cool jazz type thing by moving it down tempo, because I'm not a jazz soloist by any stretch of the imagination. It's still something that I'm learning about. And whenever I do it, in order to successfully solo over changes, I usually keep my backing track at a lower tempo, because at least with this one, I could just solo around in C Dorian without having to worry about changes. But I still feel as though the kind of harmonic rhythm that you get with the dun dun dun, like the like the dotted quarter note harmony or melody rather, or rhythm. I just like go through all the elements of music until I get the right one. The harmonic rhythm of that, you still had to like respect that a little bit. Otherwise, it just sounds like you're soloing over nothing. And that's why I kind of wanted to like have the solo work around that harmonic rhythm. What I would have done is I would have probably put a little bit more research into doing walking bass lines, and just probably would have redone the bass altogether. And I don't love the production, but I think at least the drums sound okay. Yeah. But yeah, I'll definitely, we should do this again, because this was cool. It was definitely a cool experience.
I like the idea of like maybe the next one that we do, whether it's in the next episode or not, or down the line, revisiting of our own songs, some of our earliest songs to recreate.
Yeah, I think we should do both, honestly. Like we should continue to cover each other's songs like in a later episode, and then we should also try that, because I think both of those would be an interesting kind of experiment. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then also cover the ever elusive Billy Mays Experience.
Yeah. Oh man, I don't think I've listened to those songs except for Here Comes the Shire Folk in a very long time.
I remember listening to them somewhat recently, because I think they're on your Bandcamp account, if I'm not
mistaken.
They
are actually. I think they're buried in a different album of I think it's my Lost Tracks and Rarities collection.
Yeah, every now and then I go back to your Bandcamp just to revisit memories of 2000, anytime between 2012 to 2016, when we were younger and more naive.
I think it might be on that Lost Tracks and Rarities collection I have, but I did a cover of Pink Floyd's Bike, and it's rough. It's very rough. It's a decent performance. It's decent for 2011 when it was recorded, and the fact that it was recorded using the built-in microphone on an iMac. But having said that, you can definitely hear those aspects of it. That it was clear, like I played the main vocal line on a keyboard, like an actual piano keyboard, which is playing from the keyboard's built-in speakers through the iMac built-in microphone.
Yeah.
So you can imagine right there the quality of that.
Also, I would say that this has reminded me that I have to try to employ your bass playing skills a little more, because I find that the VSTs that are offered with Logic for very simple and rudimentary compositions, they're passable, especially if they exist in a background capacity. But for something where the bass is a little more upfront, where the line is a little more audible, then that's something where I would actually prefer to have an actual bass guitar. And I'll employ your skills because you are skilled.
And I own a bass.
Yeah, and an actual acoustic bass, or a bass guitar rather, not a.
It's a Fender bass, like an actual Fender.
I'm offended by that. No,
All right.
nothing.
No, I heard the joke.
It's going into the bin. Forget it.
Into the trash it goes.
It's getting edited out.
Yeah.
Don't edit it out.
Yeah, just on a final note of our covers, I was going to say, I would absolutely listen to a whole album of you reimagining the Dead Roaches discography.
So I would say that I would love to try. The only thing about it is that the Dead Roaches is kind of tricky because there's a lot of kind of strange and random discordant harmony. And I was actually originally like looking at some of the other cuts on the album and wondering like how I should, if I should try in one of those. And I think maybe I should, but they would take a lot more time to transcribe. I mean,
well, I do have the MIDI files of the original.
Oh, okay. Well, in that
And
case, that might help.
when I was asking you about the Dead Roaches song for the brass section, I uploaded the file that I uploaded has the full album compiled into a single project file, so you'd have all the MIDI files in there.
I'll probably dissect some of those tracks more because as I listen to this album more and more, I just grow to adore it more and more.
Yeah.
And I know that effusive praise is probably not good, but on the other hand, I don't know. I just really enjoy it, and I think there's a lot of interesting ideas in here. And for you, I would say that I would love to hear more of something in the style of pseudo jazz. And once you have thought of, once you're like kind of thinking outside of the range of what you're currently doing with the singer-songwriter stuff, which I also dig, I would love to hear more. You continue to develop that style because it's, I mean, when it comes down to it is something that you thought up and you have your own kind of...
The pseudo jazz, you mean?
Yeah, pseudo jazz is something that you thought up, and the kind of creative decisions that you made in arriving at the conclusion that it's something that needs to be experimented with are yours and yours alone. And I can only kind of try to understand it, but I'm making it sound a lot more profound than it actually is. I'm sure it's not like that profound, but yeah.
Basically, the core idea behind pseudo jazz is based around the limited jazz theory I knew at the time and using those elements to my advantage to make something.
Yeah, and I think that could be bolstered quite a bit by, I mean, if you continue to develop in that style and like do more stuff, because like, I mean, nobody is, the thing is that it's a distinct idea, which makes it something that if you develop it, not only will it be something that is good just by virtue of the fact that it's a distinct idea, it'll just be good by virtue of the fact that you've kind of honed that craft and you've developed that idea more. But if that makes any sense whatsoever. But
no, yeah, for sure. Dead Roaches was the second pseudo jazz album I did. The first one being Pseudo Classics Disc 1.
Yeah.
Which featured...
I think you gave me that one on CD, right? Or was that the blue
I did
one?
have a CD release of that one. Yeah, I did. That one, I think, might have even been made in GarageBand. And it, using that same keyboard that I used to record my cover of Bike. So it wasn't a great keyboard. It had no velocity detection, so all the notes on that album are played at the same dynamic.
Yeah. Velocity detection. I mean, be careful what you wish for, because my keyboard is velocity sensitive. I mean, if you hit a note like too soft, it won't detect it at all. If you hit it too hard, it'll be velocity of 127 out of 127. So
yeah,
fuck, it's like
I definitely
sensitive.
play around with it a lot more now that I have one that has that detection, but it gives it some variety. But that original album was the very playing it safe in terms of what pseudo jazz is, and even the last song on the album is not all that jazzy, but that's the beauty of pseudo jazz, as the title.
Yeah.
Then Dead Roaches was supposed to be more of that uneasy feeling.
Yeah.
To sound as if it was a song being performed live by a collection of insects.
Yeah.
The unsettling feeling of that is associated with insects. And I think I have been thinking about creating a new pseudo jazz album. And with my recent love of all things chaos and chaotic jazz in particular, I feel like that would probably be the logical next step for it.
Well, I'd love to feature on it in some capacity. If
you
would
would absolutely feature on it.
Cool.
You and your Joe Pass guitar are the essential piece of the puzzle.
Nice. I've was improvising earlier today on my keyboard, and I actually was started working on an old kind of jazz-esque composition. It's not jazz because it's not, it doesn't follow that kind of rhythm. It's almost more of like a classical piece, like a 20th century kind of impressionistic composition, something more like Camille Saint-Saëns or something like that. But it uses a lot of the same kind of extended harmony and kind of strange, unexpected cadences and things like that you would find in jazz. And so I think I'm going to work on that a little more. But I originally composed it in order to work on, like, I have a lot of compositions that I use just to learn about composing and that to like experiment with stuff. Because if it works, then you add it to the composition and then you practice it and then you continue to develop those ideas. So this is one of them. It's like a test composition. It's like a guinea pig composition almost.